This story is titled, My Entitled Wife Asks Me to Allow Her Deadbeat Ex-Husband to Move In With Us as They Are Grieving My Stepdaughter. Her family pushed me to agree on that. She cheats on me with him, and I let her entire family watch them on act. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit, let me give you some background before we dive into this mess. When I, 36 male, married Melissa, 35 female, I didn't just sign up for a wife. I signed up for a kid who deserved better than the hand she'd been dealt. I was more of a parent to Anna, stepdaughter, than either of her biological parents ever were. Anna's dad, Rick, was the kind of guy who thought showing up once a year with a cheap birthday gift made him a good father. He'd swoop in, play the doting dad for a weekend, and then vanish for months at a time. Melissa wasn't much better. Sure, she lived with Anna, but she was more focused on her Instagram perfect image than actually being a mom. PTA meetings? Nope. Helping with homework? Forget it. She couldn't even remember the names of Anna's teachers. When I came into Anna's life, I made a promise to myself. I was going to be the dad she deserved. And I kept that promise. I showed up to every soccer game, parent-teacher conference, and school play. I stayed up late helping her with science projects and gave her pep talks when she was nervous about a big test. I even learned how to braid hair because she wanted cool dad braids, like the ones her friends' moms did. Anna and I had a bond that went beyond the usual stepdad-stepdaughter dynamic. She trusted me in a way she didn't trust anyone else. When she had a crush on a boy at school, I was the one she came to for advice. When she got her first period and Melissa was too busy scrolling on her phone to care, I was the one who ran to the store to buy her supplies and make sure she was okay. I wasn't just a stepdad, I was her safe place. So when Anna passed away, it shattered me. She was only 14. It was sudden, unfair, and it left a hole in my heart I don't think will ever fully heal. But even in my grief, I knew I had to be the strong one. Melissa was a wreck, understandably so, but she checked out completely. Bills, my responsibility, funeral arrangements, me again. Comforting family members, all on me. I didn't complain because I loved Anna, and I thought I loved Melissa enough to carry the weight for both of us. But then Melissa decided to test just how much I was willing to take by suggesting the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. It was about a week after Anna's funeral. We were sitting in the living room, and Melissa looked at me with this sad, pitiful expression. I thought she was going to say something about how hard the day had been, or how much she missed Anna. Instead, she hit me with this gem. I think Rick should move in with us. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh or say it was a joke. She didn't. You want your ex-husband to move in here? I asked, just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. He's grieving, she said, like that explained everything. He doesn't have anyone else, and I think it would be good for him to be around people who understand what he's going through. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Melissa, Rick is a grown man. He can figure out his own life. Why is it our responsibility to take care of him? She gave me this look like I was some heartless monster. He's Anna's father, she said, as if that meant anything. I shut it down immediately. Number absolutely not. He's not moving in here. That should have been the end of it. But then her family got involved. I don't know what Melissa told them, but suddenly, I was getting calls and texts from her mom, her sister, even her dad. Her mom was the worst. You need to think about what Anna would have wanted, she said, as if Anna would have been thrilled to have her deadbeat dad crashing in her house. Her sister wasn't much better. She sent me this long text about how Rick was part of the family and how I needed to put my pride aside for the sake of healing. Even her dad, who usually stayed out of this kind of stuff, called me up to say, look, I know it's not ideal, but Rick's going through a hard time. Maybe you could help him out for a little while. I wanted to scream. These people had no idea what they were asking of me. They weren't the ones who'd have to deal with Rick lounging around the house, eating my food, and contributing absolutely nothing. They weren't the ones who'd have to deal with the awkward tension of having their wife's ex-husband under the same roof. But they wouldn't let up. Melissa kept bringing it up too, always with that same sad, guilt-trippy tone. He doesn't have anyone else, she'd say, like it was my fault he was a loser. Or, it's just temporary, you know. He's not asking for much. Not asking for much? He was asking for a free ride in a house I paid for, under a roof I maintained, eating food I bought. If that's not asking for much, I don't know what is. After a week of this nonsense, I finally gave in. Not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of the constant nagging. Fine, I said. But there are rules. He stays in the guest room. He contributes to the house. And he stays out of my way. Got it? Melissa nodded, acting all grateful, but I could see the smug little smile she was trying to hide. She thought she'd won, and maybe she did for the moment. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end well. I just had to wait for them to screw up. And trust me, they would. So Rick moved in, and from the very first day, the guy made it clear he was going to be a problem. He showed up with 2 duffel bags and a cheap 6-pack of drinks, like he was crashing at a buddy's place for the weekend instead of moving into my house. I was already irritated, but I kept my cool. I told myself, let him settle in. Maybe he'll surprise you. The first thing he did was take over the guest room. Now, when I say guest room, I don't mean some luxury suite. It's a small room with a twin bed, a dresser, and a closet. Nothing fancy, but perfectly fine for someone who's supposed to be staying temporarily. Rick, however, treated it like a hotel. Within a day, his stuff was everywhere. Clothes on the floor, empty cans on the nightstand, and some crusty old pillow he brought that smelled like it hadn't been washed in years. Melissa, of course, was all, he's just settling in, give him a break. Fine, I gave him a break. But then the real nonsense started. First, he had no sense of boundaries. The man acted like he owned the place. He'd walk into the kitchen shirtless while I was making coffee, scratching his stomach like some sitcom slob. He'd take over the living room to watch whatever garbage he wanted, leaving his dirty socks on the couch. And the food? Don't get me started on the food. Don't get me. I'd come home looking forward to a meal, only to find that Rick had helped himself to everything in the fridge. Leftover lasagna? Gone. The steak I was saving for the weekend? He grilled it for lunch. I even caught him drinking straight out of the milk carton. When I called him out on it, he shrugged and said, I'll get more tomorrow. But he never did. Melissa? She barely said anything. If I complained, she'd brush it off with excuses. He's still adjusting. It's just his way. Don't be so uptight. Meanwhile, I was losing my mind. But the worst part wasn't Rick's freeloading. It was how cozy he and Melissa were getting. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. I mean, grief does weird stuff to people, right? Maybe they were just bonding over their shared pain. But the more I saw, the harder it was to ignore. One night, I came home late from work and found them on the couch, watching a movie. Nothing wrong with that, except Melissa was sitting way too close, like thigh-touching close. She jumped up when I walked in, acting all guilty. Oh, we were just watching something, she said. Like that explained anything. I didn't say anything then, but my gut was screaming. Something wasn't right. It got worse from there. Melissa started spending more time with Rick, always finding excuses to be around him. Oh, I'm just checking if he's okay. We were talking about Anna. He needed help organizing his stuff. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and realized Melissa wasn't in bed. I got up to look for her and found her sitting in the kitchen with Rick, whispering and laughing like they were at some high school sleepover. When they saw me, they both froze like kids caught stealing cookies. What's going on? I asked, keeping my voice calm even though I was fuming inside. Melissa stammered something about just talking, and Rick mumbled an apology before slinking back to his room. I didn't push it, yet. But from that moment on, I started paying closer attention. The red flags kept piling up, like the time I found Melissa sitting on Rick's bed, helping him fold his laundry, or the time she skipped dinner with me to keep Rick company because he was feeling down. One day, I overheard them talking in the living room. Melissa was laughing at some dumb joke Rick made, and I heard her say, "You're so funny. I forgot how funny you are." Forgot? Since when was she reminiscing about how funny Rick used to be? I started testing the waters, casually bringing Rick up in conversations to see how Melissa would react. Anytime I even hinted that he might be overstaying his welcome, she'd get defensive. He's not bothering anyone. He's still grieving. You're making a big deal out of nothing. The final straw came a few weeks later. I was looking for something in the laundry room and found Rick's shirt mixed in with our clothes. Not just any shirt, his nasty, stained undershirt that he wore to relax. I confronted Melissa about it, and she got all flustered. Oh, I just threw it in with our stuff to save water. Save water? I said, staring at her. Since when do you care about saving water? She didn't have an answer. She just mumbled something and walked away. I knew something was up, but I didn't have concrete proof. I thought about confronting her directly, but I knew she'd just gaslight me. You're being paranoid. You're imagining things. You're overreacting. If I was going to take them down, I needed to do it in a way they couldn't deny. All right. By this point, I was done playing nice. Rick was freeloading. Melissa was acting suspicious as hell, and I was tired of being made to feel like the bad guy in my own home. If they thought they could walk all over me and get away with it, they had another thing coming. I wasn't about to confront them head-on without proof. No, I needed something undeniable, something that would expose them in a way they couldn't talk their way out of. That's when I came up with the plan. It hit me one morning while I was having coffee. watching Melissa and Rick whisper to each other across the kitchen table, like they were plotting some secret mission. Her family had been all over me about how Rick was family and how we needed to support him. Fine. I'd use their own words against them. I decided to throw a surprise family dinner. A big one. Melissa's parents, her sisters, her cousins, anyone who'd ever tried to guilt trip me about Rick. I made it seem like I was doing something nice, like I was the big-hearted guy they all pretended I wasn't. First, I called her mom. Hey, I've been thinking, I said, laying it on thick. It's been a tough time for all of us, and I think we should do something special for Melissa and Rick. A surprise dinner, you know? Something to show them we're all here for them. She ate it up. Oh, that's such a wonderful idea. I think it would mean so much to them. I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. Her mom immediately offered to bring a casserole, and before I knew it, the rest of the family was on board. Everyone was talking about how thoughtful I was, how kind I was to organize this. I let them believe whatever they wanted because, trust me, they were about to get a front row seat to the truth. The key to the plan was making sure Melissa didn't suspect anything. I told her I'd be working late that night, maybe even staying at a buddy's place if we went out for drinks afterward. Don't wait up, I said casually. She didn't even question it. Meanwhile, I was orchestrating the whole thing. I made sure everyone showed up at the house at exactly 6 p.m. Zrenia, right after Rick and Melissa would have settled into their usual routine of lounging around like a couple of unemployed characters. The day of the dinner, I left for work like normal, but instead of heading to the office, I ran errands to prepare. I picked up drinks, a few snacks, and some disposable plates, because I wasn't about to let these people leave me with a sink full of dishes. At 5:45 p.m., I parked a few blocks away from the house and waited for everyone to arrive. Melissa's mom and dad were the first ones there, pulling up with a giant casserole dish and a cake. Her sisters followed soon after, along with a couple of cousins who brought side dishes and drinks. By 6 p.m., we had a full house, and I could barely contain my excitement. All right, everyone, I said, addressing the group. We're going to head inside, set everything up, and then I'll go get Melissa. She has no idea, so act surprised when she comes down. They all nodded, smiling and whispering about how thoughtful this was. I unlocked the door, let them in, and we quietly started setting up in the dining room. Now, here's where it gets good. After everything was in place, I motioned for Melissa's mom to come with me. You should be the one to wake her up, I said. It'll be a nice surprise. She agreed, of course, and followed me upstairs. I walked to the bedroom, opened the door without knocking, and boom, there they were. Melissa and Rick, half-dressed, tangled up in the sheets of my bed. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of Melissa's mom yelling, "What the hell is this?" as she stood frozen in the doorway of my bedroom. Her voice was loud enough to shake the whole house and probably half the neighborhood. It was the kind of scene you'd see in a trashy reality show, except this was my actual life. Rick, the sorry excuse of a man, was scrambling to put on his pants like he'd just remembered how clothes worked. Melissa? She just sat there, clutching the sheets to her chest, her face pale and blotchy. I'd never seen her look so guilty. And that's saying something because Melissa's not exactly a stranger to shady behavior. But this was another level. Surprise dinner, I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Thought you'd enjoy the family's support, considering everything you've been going through. The chaos spread like wildfire. Melissa's mom turned to me, her face a mix of shock and betrayal. What is going on here? Oh, you know, I said with a shrug. Just Rick and Melissa keeping each other warm while grieving. Real heartwarming stuff, huh? That's when the rest of the family came upstairs. First Melissa's dad, then her sisters, and finally her cousins, all drawn by the commotion. They crowded around, craning their necks to see what was happening. It didn't take long for them to piece it together. One of her sisters, Stephanie, was the first to speak. Melissa, what the actual hell? Melissa finally found her voice, though it wasn't much. It's not what it looks like, she blurted out, tears streaming down her face. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, I shot back. You don't end up half naked in bed with your ex-husband because you're grieving. Rick, meanwhile, was trying to sneak past everyone, his pants only halfway zipped. Melissa's dad blocked him with a single glare. You're not going anywhere, you piece of crap, he growled. Now let me tell you something about Melissa's dad. He's not a loud guy, but when he's angry, you feel it. Rick froze like a deer in headlights, mumbling something about not wanting to cause trouble. Not cause trouble, Melissa's dad roared. You're in another man's house, sleeping with his wife, and you think you're not causing trouble. By this point, the rest of the family was jumping in. Her mom was crying, her sisters were yelling, and her cousins were shaking their heads in disgust. You had a husband who did everything for you, Stephanie shouted at Melissa. And this is how you repay him? Melissa just kept crying, repeating the same pathetic line. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. A mistake? I said. finally stepping into the room. This wasn't a one-time slip-up, Melissa. This has been going on for weeks, hasn't it? Maybe even months. She didn't answer, which was all the confirmation I needed. Rick tried to open his mouth to say something, but Melissa's dad cut him off. "Don't even try," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've said enough just by being here." The whole scene was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Horrible, but you couldn't look away. The family kept piling on, and I just stood back, letting them do the work for me. Eventually, I raised my hand to quiet everyone down. "All right," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I think we've all seen enough. Melissa, pack your things. Rick, get out of my house. Both of you are done here." Melissa started begging, of course. "Please, can we just talk? I made a mistake. I love you." I laughed, actually laughed. "You love me? Is that why you've been sneaking around with your ex under my roof? Save it, Melissa. You've already shown me exactly who you are." She tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away. "You don't come back from this," I said coldly. "There's no fixing it. No talking it out. We're done." Rick, sensing that things were about to get worse for him, finally found his voice. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You accidentally tripped and fell into my wife's bed? Multiple times, I'm guessing?" He didn't have an answer for that, so he just stood there, staring at the floor like the spineless coward he is. Melissa's mom finally stepped in, turning to Rick with pure venom in her voice. "You need to leave, right now, and don't you ever come near this family again." Rick tried to argue, but Melissa's dad wasn't having it. "You heard her," he said, stepping forward. "Get out." Rick grabbed his things and bolted, muttering something under his breath about how he didn't deserve this, as if he was the victim here. Melissa, however, didn't move. She just sat on the bed, crying and pleading. "Please, just give me one more chance." "Why?" I said, my voice steady. "So you can do it again?" "No, Melissa. You made your choice and now you get to live with it." Her mom and dad didn't even look at her. Her sisters were still yelling, but it was clear they weren't on her side anymore. "I think you should leave too," her mom finally said, her voice cold. "You're not welcome here anymore." Melissa looked completely shattered, but I didn't feel bad for her. Not even a little. She'd made her bed, literally, and now she had to lie in it. First off, Melissa didn't leave quietly. Oh no, she made a big show of packing her things, crying loudly enough for the neighbors to hear, and mumbling about how I'd never understand what she was going through. I didn't say much. What was there to say? But when she grabbed some of my stuff by mistake, I did step in. "That's mine," I said, pulling the watch she'd bought me for our anniversary out of her suitcase. "You don't get to take things that don't belong to you. Not anymore." She just stared at me, her eyes all red and puffy. "You're being so cold," she sniffled. "Cold?" I said, laughing. "You cheated on me in my own house, in my own bed, and I'm the one being cold? Get real, Melissa." That shut her up. Briefly, she stormed out, muttering under her breath about how she'd regret this forever. Good. Regret was exactly what I wanted her to feel. All right, so Melissa was out. Rick was gone. The whole house smelled like betrayal and cheap cologne, but at least the trash was finally taken out. You'd think this would be the part where things calmed down, right? Nah, the drama was just getting started. Sure, there was still a lot to deal with. Divorce papers, cleaning up the mess they'd left behind, and figuring out how to explain all of this to people who weren't there. But at least the poison was gone. The next few days were interesting, to say the least. Melissa's family, who had been so quick to defend Rick and pressure me into letting him move in, did a complete 180. Her mom called me the morning after the big reveal. "I don't know what to say," she started, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry, truly. We never should have pushed you to let Rick stay." "Yeah, you shouldn't have," I said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. "But you did, and now you've seen exactly who Melissa and Rick really are." "I hope it was worth it." She started crying, but I didn't stick around to console her. It wasn't my job anymore. Then there were her sisters. Stephanie texted me a long message about how ashamed she was of Melissa, and how she couldn't believe her own sister would betray me like that. "She didn't just betray me," I replied. "She betrayed all of you too. You all vouched for Rick. You all believed her lies. Maybe next time, you'll trust the guy who actually shows up for your family, instead of the deadbeat who can't even keep his pants on." Stephanie apologized profusely, and while I appreciated it, I wasn't in the mood to play nice. Melissa's dad, on the other hand, handled it differently. He showed up at my door with a case of drinks and a simple, "You didn't deserve any of that." We sat on the porch drinking in silence for a while before he finally spoke. "I've always respected you," he said. "You've been more of a man than Rick could ever hope to be. I'm sorry we didn't see what was happening sooner. It wasn't much, but it felt sincere." I nodded and said, "Well, at least now you know the truth." The days that followed, I wasted no time getting the ball rolling. I called up my lawyer the day after Melissa moved out and told him to draft the papers. Melissa tried to drag things out, of course. She kept calling and texting, saying we should talk things through and figure out a way to fix this. There's nothing to fix, I told her. You broke it, Melissa. You broke us. Sign the papers and move on. She stalled for a couple of weeks, probably hoping I'd change my mind. Of course I didn't. When she finally realized I wasn't budging, she signed the papers and sent them back with a note that said, I'll always love you. Yeah, sure you will, Melissa. You love me so much that you couldn't keep your hands off your ex. Real convincing. Right after she signed the divorce papers, Melissa had the nerve to file a claim demanding spousal support. She argued that she had been a stay-at-home wife and that I owed her because she sacrificed her career to support me. Newsflash, Melissa never had a career. Her full-time job was taking selfies and pretending to be busy on Instagram. My lawyer and I laughed when we saw the paperwork. But we didn't stop there. I had receipts, bank statements, evidence of her frivolous spending, and proof that I was the one paying for everything, down to her overpriced skincare products. My lawyer went to work, and trust me, we were ready to destroy her in court. Here's where it gets good, though. Melissa must have thought her family would back her up. Big mistake. When they found out what she was trying to pull, they turned on her harder than ever. Her mom called me again, furious. She's trying to get money out of you after everything she did? She yelled. We're not standing for this. Her dad, usually the quiet type, was livid. He offered to testify against her if it came to that. She's not getting a dime from you, he told me. Not after the way she treated you and us. Even her sisters, who had been on the fence after the whole cheating debacle, were done. Stephanie texted me saying, if she drags this to court, I'll take the stand. I'll tell the judge everything, from the affair to how she's been lying to everyone about you. Melissa must have caught wind of this, because she called me, crying and begging me to settle things amicably. She even threw out lines like, I just want what's fair, and we can handle this like adults. I told her, straight up, fair? You don't get to use that word after everything you've done. She tried to guilt trip me, of course. I've lost everything, and you're just making it worse, she sobbed. I told her the truth. You lost everything because of your own choices. This isn't my problem anymore. The cherry on top? When she realized she was losing, she tried to claim that Rick had convinced her to go after my money. Yeah, she threw him under the bus to save herself. Classic Melissa. Long story short, she dropped her ridiculous claim when it became clear her entire family and anyone with a shred of decency was willing to take me down. I didn't pay her a cent, and the court finalized our divorce without any drama on my end. As for Rick, oh, he got exactly what he deserved. Word spread fast about what happened, and no one wanted anything to do with him. He tried reaching out to Melissa's family, probably hoping they'd take pity on him, but they weren't having it. Her dad actually told me he threatened to call the cops if Rick showed up at his house again. From what I heard, Rick ended up crashing on a friend's couch for a while before getting kicked out for being a slob. Last I checked, he was living in some rundown motel, still pretending like he was the victim in all this. Melissa didn't fare much better. Her family turned on her completely. Her mom refused to speak to her for weeks, and her sisters stopped inviting her to family events. She tried to play the victim, of course, telling anyone who would listen that she was overwhelmed with grief and made a mistake. But no one bought it, not after what they saw. I heard through the grapevine that she moved in with a friend who didn't know the full story. I doubt that arrangement will last long. People like Melissa always end up showing their true colors. Then, about a month ago, I heard from one of her sisters, Stephanie. She told me Melissa's sob story wasn't landing the way she'd hoped. Apparently, her friend kicked her out. Why? Because Melissa borrowed money from her without asking and didn't bother paying it back. Classic Melissa. Now she's couch hopping between acquaintances, and from what Stephanie said, she's burned almost every bridge she had. Even her mom won't take her in. She's got to figure it out on her own, her mom told Stephanie. Honestly, I didn't think her family had it in them to hold her accountable, but here we are. Now, here's where it gets really wild. A couple of weeks ago, Stephanie texted me with some juicy gossip. Melissa and Rick tried to rekindle their relationship. Yup, you read that right. After all the chaos, they thought they could play house together. Apparently, Melissa tracked Rick down and convinced him they should start over. She probably figured they were both at rock bottom. So why not sing together, right? Well, that lasted all of 2 weeks. Rick, being Rick, couldn't keep his act together long enough to make it work. He was still his lazy, entitled self, and Melissa finally realized he wasn't going to magically become a decent human being. They had a massive fight, like screaming in public kind of fight, and Melissa kicked him out of wherever they were staying. Now she's on her own again, and Rick's back to living in his car. Poetic, isn't it? Now let's talk about me. I took some time to clean up the house, both literally and figuratively. I tossed out anything that reminded me of Melissa and Rick. Sheets, pictures, even the furniture in the bedroom. It was time for a fresh start. Life isn't perfect, but it's better. And honestly, I'm proud of myself for how I handled everything. I could have gone nuclear and burned every bridge, but I didn't. I exposed the truth, got rid of the problem, and moved on.